vast emptiness of the Mongolian steppe, where the wind never stops and the horizon feels infinite, a boy was once born who would change the shape of the world forever. His name was Temujin, and at the time of his birth, no one, not even him, could have imagined that he would one day become known as Genghis Khan, ruler of the largest contiguous empire in human history. But this is not a story of destiny. It is a story of survival, of betrayal, of brutal adaptation, and of a man forged in suffering so extreme it reshaped his understanding of power itself. To understand Genghis Khan, you have to understand the world that created him. The world before the Khan 12th century Mongolia was not a nation. It was a fractured landscape of nomadic tribes, Merkit, Tatars, Karat, Naiman, each constantly raiding, betraying, and fighting each other for survival. There were no cities of power here, no stability, only horses, yurts, blood feuds, and hunger. Life was governed by one rule: strength decides truth. And into this world, Temujin was born around 1162. His father, a minor tribal leader, was poisoned by rivals when Temujin was still a child. With his death, Temujin's family was abandoned by their own clan, left to die in the freezing steppe with no protection. This moment is critical, because it defines everything that comes after. Temujin did not grow up with power. He grew up with loss, survival, and the making of a predator. As a boy, Temujin and his family survived by foraging, hunting small animals, and scraping together whatever they could find. There are accounts of starvation so severe that his family fought over scraps. At one point, Temujin killed his own half-brother in a dispute over food. This is not mythology. This is the environment shaping a future conqueror. But the most defining early moment came when Temujin was captured by a rival tribe, the Taichud. He was enslaved. A wooden collar was placed around his neck. He was beaten, guarded, and treated as less than human. But Temujin escaped. According to legend, he hid in a river, breathing through a hollow reed while guards searched for him just steps away. Whether entirely accurate or not, the symbolism is clear. Temujin learned early that survival requires patience, deception, and psychological control. He was not the strongest man on the steppe, but he was the one who refused to stay down. The first followers to Temujin's rise did not begin with armies. It began with loyalty. In a world where alliances were temporary and betrayal was normal, Temujin developed a radical idea: merit over blood, loyalty over tribe. He began gathering companions who were not necessarily powerful, but loyal. One of his closest allies was Jamuka, a blood brother from his youth. At first, they fought together, but eventually, ideology split them. Jamuka represented the old tribal aristocracy. Temujin represented something new, a unified structure based on discipline and reward. This conflict would define the early wars of his rise, and Temujin began winning, not because he had more men, but because his men stayed. The brutality of unification. As Temujin's influence grew, so did the scale of his conflict. He united smaller tribes through a combination of diplomacy, reward, intimidation, and total annihilation of those who resisted. And here is the uncomfortable truth of his rise. Temujin was not just a unifier. He was a destroyer of the old world. Entire tribes that resisted him were absorbed, scattered, or erased. But those who joined him were integrated, regardless of origin. Former enemies could rise to high rank if they proved loyalty. This was revolutionary for the steppe. Power was no longer inherited. It was earned through obedience and competence. This system attracted outcasts, warriors, and ambitious men who had no place in the old tribal order. Temujin was building something new, a machine of loyalty. And by the beginning of the 13th century, that machine was becoming unstoppable. The final obstacle standing in Temujin's path was Jamuka. The two men had once sworn loyalty as blood brothers, but now they represented two completely different visions for the future of Mongolia. Jamuka believed leadership belonged to noble families and ancient bloodlines. Temujin believed leadership belonged to whoever could prove themselves worthy. Their rivalry plunged the steppe into years of warfare. Tribes were forced to choose sides. Alliances shifted constantly. Former friends became enemies. But with every conflict, Temujin's influence expanded. Warriors joined him not because of tradition, but because his system worked. A common herdsman could rise through merit. A former enemy could earn trust through loyalty. For many people living under the old tribal system, this was a revolutionary idea. Slowly, the balance of power shifted. Eventually, Jamuka's support collapsed. He was captured by his own followers and delivered to Temujin. The war that had shaped a generation was over. For the first time in his life, Temujin stood without a serious rival. Then came the moment that changed everything. In 1206, the tribes gathered for a Kurultai, a grand assembly beneath the endless Mongolian sky. Leaders from across the steppe arrived to witness history. There, Temujin received a new title, Genghis Khan. The exact meaning remains debated, but its significance is undeniable. The tribes of Mongolia were united. A nation had been born. But perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is how unlikely it all was. Genghis Khan had not inherited a great kingdom. He had not been born into overwhelming power. He began life as a hungry child abandoned by his own people. He survived starvation. He survived slavery. He survived betrayal. And through those experiences, he developed an understanding of power unlike anyone around him. He knew loyalty mattered more than status. He knew adaptability mattered more than tradition. And he knew that fear could be as powerful as any weapon. These lessons would soon be carried far beyond Mongolia, because Genghis Khan was not content simply to unite the steppe. Beyond the horizon lay rich kingdoms, ancient cities, and powerful empires that viewed the Mongols as little more than barbarians. They saw horsemen. They saw nomads. They saw a people they believed were beneath them. What they failed to see was that a military revolution had just been born. The Mongol army moved faster than almost any force on Earth. Its commanders were promoted by ability. Its warriors were fiercely loyal. Its leader had spent his entire life learning how to survive against impossible odds. The rise of Genghis Khan was complete. The boy named Temujin had become ruler of a united Mongolia. But the story that would make him immortal was only beginning. Within decades, his armies would cross deserts, mountains, and continents. Empires would collapse. Cities would burn. The map of the known world would be redrawn. And the name Genghis Khan would become one of the most feared and influential in human history. Not because he was destined for greatness, but because he survived long enough to seize it.